Let's talk about transformations of graphs, and we'll start with translations, which are also known as shifts. Okay, so let's just start with a graph of a function, and I'll use a parabola whose vertex is located at, let's say, 0, 2. Alright, so here's f of x, and it crosses the y-axis right at a height of 2. Okay, so first let's suppose I want to translate this graph vertically by 1 unit, or shift it up by 1 unit. Well, that just entails taking your function and evaluating it, and then afterwards just adding 1 to the output. What we get is our pink graph, which looks the exact same in terms of shape, but it's just moved up by 1 unit at each place. Now what's the formula? What's the symbolic form of this function? Well, it's just our function evaluated at each x point, and then we added that 1 to shift it up. So this is the symbolic form of this pink function. So if instead we wanted to shift the function down by 2 units, we would do something very similar, as you might have guessed. We'd just take our function and we'd evaluate it, and then we'd subtract off those 2 units to shift it down. And we would get something that again has the same shape, but it's just shifted down by 2 units. So the general form of a vertical shift or a vertical translation is just take the function and evaluate it at all the inputs, and then just add the number of units that you want to shift it. If you're moving it up, you add a positive number of units, and you're moving it down, then you add a negative number of units. For example, f of x minus 2 is the same as f of x plus negative 2. And that negative right there indicates that we want to shift it down 2 units instead of up 2 units. Alright, so the other type of shift or translation is a horizontal translation. So let me redraw our graph here. I'll use the same one, a parabola whose vertex occurs right at 0, 2. Alright. Now if I want to shift my parabola to the right by 1 unit, that's just taking every point and moving it over. And so now the vertex will occur at 1, 2 instead of 0, 2. And all these points will move over by 1 unit. But other than that, the shape of the parabola will stay the same. And you can just see how it's shifted over by 1 unit in every case. Now what's the formula for this function? Well, there are 2 main differences compared to the vertical translation, which we see here. Notice in the vertical translation, the shifting occurs after the function is evaluated. We evaluate the function and then we change the output. For a horizontal translation, we actually change the input. So we're going to be changing what's inside the parentheses, and in this case we actually subtract off the number of units that we want to move to the right. So the pink function has a formula f of quantity x minus 1. Now if instead we want to shift it to the left, let's say by 2 units, right? Then we just, again, we've moved it over 2 units, and we get something that has the same shape, but is just over to the side by 2 units. And the formula for this is x, and I'll be clear, again, let's subtract off, this time negative 2 units, because we want to move it to the left, which you might see as f of x plus 2, but I like to always think of it as subtracting, and then I just remember if I'm subtracting a positive number, it moves to the right, and if I'm subtracting a negative number, it moves to the left. So the general form for a horizontal translation is to take your input and subtract off the number of units you want to move to the right, where those units are positive if you're moving to the right and negative if you're moving to the left.